Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Crash Zoom. I'm Sammie Purcell, Associate Editor with Rough Draft Atlanta, and I'm here, as always, with Aaron Strand, an independent filmmaker here in Atlanta. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing all right. Sammie, how are you?
I'm good. I'm a little sweaty. I had to turn off the fan in this room because it was really noisy.
Wait, what are you talking about? It's like freezing cold outside here in Atlanta.
Yeah, so my temperature regulation is really off. Like, I like the room hot, but I like a fan on. Like, I can't sleep in a room that's cold, but I also can't sleep without a fan blowing on me at all times. I have a lot of issues.
That's so weird. That's contrary to like all conventional logic, which is that you should sleep in the cold.
I am illogical. I turned up the heat this morning because it was hard to get to sleep last night because it was too cold, but I still need that fan on. I need to be like really cuddled up and warm, but with like the blast of air coming at me. You know what I mean? Probably not.
Wow. That's totally strange. That's totally opposite of how I would ever do it. And maybe that's why our partnership on a podcast works, because on many things we come down as total opposites.
I know. That's what makes good podcasting, you know?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm totally an anti-hot sleeper. I can't do it cold as possible.
I like sleep with my socks on. Like, my God.
Yeah. Listen, you're already offending me. I'm already triggered.
You're already amped up.
I am.
Let's go. Well, if you've never listened to Crash Zoom before, this is about how it usually goes. But what Aaron and I like to do here each week is we look at the film industry news. We look at what's going on in the industry on a big picture level and try to boil that down and figure out why it matters to the independent filmmaker. And if you listen today and you like what you hear, please do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, or you can watch us on YouTube at Crash Zoom Podcast. Be sure to rate and review too. That really helps us out. Before we get into the news roundup, and I thought it was going to be a light week when I started looking for stuff to talk about, but it's pretty hefty this week. So before we get into all that, Aaron, what have you been watching this week?
Well, Sammie, listen, this is just a recurring bit. I have only watched Zootopia this week. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh my God.
I'm just kidding. I have not watched Zootopia for a third week in a row. No, I actually got to watch some movies this week, and I'm pretty excited. Okay, so the first one... first of all, I saw Nickel Boys. Oh my God.
What'd you think?
It was amazing.
Okay.
I thought it was incredible. Yeah.
It's so good. Great. Amazing
it was
stuff.
Great. I was devastated.
Yeah.
I was devastated.
It's really tough. Yeah. Have you read the book?
God.
Or
No.
Okay. So the ending like differs a little bit from the book, but they're both just like so devastating. And I was, it's the kind of ending where I was like, oh, if they changed that, I think I'd be really upset. But the way they do it in the movie is like beautiful. It was really interesting. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, I have my little like thoughts here and there.
Sure.
Certain things like I wouldn't do it that way, but as a piece of art was just it was staggering. It was a true emotional experience. That is like what I ultimately like expect from this art form, and it delivered. And my God, amazing.
Yeah.
I also saw a like very obscure piece of cinema, like ephemera, that I was very excited about. So it's this movie. Okay, I didn't even know this was like really a thing, but in the 50s and 60s, the Italians made all these like weird anthology films where there's basically like 3 or 4 stories like told over a feature film timeline,
Okay.
And yeah. I always saw I've seen like the Mario Bava like anthology horror films like Black Sabbath and stuff, so I kind of thought that was the limit of it, but no, it's a bunch of weird dramas too. And so my buddy over at Videodrome, John, he was like, hey, have you seen, and I think it's pronounced Rogopagi? Rogopag? He's like, yeah, it's this weird Italian film, and guess who the directors are that have made the anthology? It's Roberto Rossellini, Jean-Luc Godard, Pier Paolo Pasolini, and Ugo Gregoretti. The Gregoretti is the one I hadn't seen, but that's how they got the name. Oh my God. So Rossellini, Godard, Pasolini, Gregoretti. And this movie was like so weird. All the shorts are like super cynical. The one that Pastellini did stars Orson Welles as the director of a film in the film. So, I mean, this is like such cinephile nerd shit. I wouldn't call it good, but I wouldn't call it boring. And yeah, I just like, I'd never heard about it before. But yeah, Rogopaji, I don't even know how it's supposed to be pronounced, but I was here for it.
You know, they thought they were so cute coming up with that name. They were like,
oh my God, yes.
Like, this is so funny.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. Speaking of Nickel Boys, I just want to go back a little bit. If anyone out there listening, read any and all interviews you can with Ramel Ross. There's one that I did that's up on Rough Draft, shameless plug, but really like any interviews, he's like incredibly smart. And I think the way he, articulates how he like approached this film and just his thoughts on like cinema as an art form, really interesting to read. He's a really smart guy. So just wanted to plug that a little bit.
Have you seen his documentary that he made?
I've watched bits and pieces of it. I wasn't able to get the full thing in before I interviewed him, but I like tried to watch as much as I could just to get an idea, because that is sort of like kind of a proof of concept for like the POV kind of idea. Have you seen it?
No.
Yeah. So it like does you can see like where the kind of visual ideas for Nickel Boys like might have arisen from watching that movie. It's really interesting.
I need to talk to his PR people, because somehow that documentary came out in 2018 and yet he was listed as 2015 Filmmaker magazine's filmmakers you need to watch, and at that point he had no films on his resume. So I gotta figure out how his PR team is like is getting him to be a filmmaker to watch without a film.
Yeah, that's pretty good. PR people, the devil works hard, but they work harder.
Unless you're Justin Baldoni, and then they are both.
So I have not been watching anything near as obscure, but I do have a little old, a little bit of new. I'll start with the new. So I saw the movie Companion last night, which I think it released in theaters like at the end of January, I believe. It stars Sophie Thatcher. If you watch Yellow Jackets, you'll know who she is. And Jack Quaid, who is quickly developing a kind of oeuvre of this type of character that he plays in this movie.
Yeah.
Which, great for him. Everyone's got to have a passion.
Yeah. The problematic white male, right?
Yeah. Yes. Very fragile. Got a really fragile ego, real fragile, which he kind of has a punchable face. I say all this with lot of love. Like, he's really good at this kind of thing, I think. And I like this movie okay. I think it's definitely worth going to see. I think there's some third act problems that sort of arise, and they're problems that I usually have with like movies of this sort, kind of like horror comedy, where it just like kind of drags everything out like a little bit too long in ways that maybe don't make a ton of sense. But I thought the performances were really good. I thought it was very funny. If anyone is not a horror fan, it's not very scary at all. It's kind of gory, but it's just pretty funny. It's essentially, I don't really want to say what it's about actually, because I think some people, not me, we had this conversation last week, were a little turned off by how much the most recent trailer gives away. So I'll sort of hold off on what it's about, but I thought it was a lot of fun. Not amazing, but pretty good. Definitely worth going to check out. And then the other one that I watched recently was a little movie called E.T. that I have not seen since I was a child. And I have a very interesting relationship to this movie, because when I was a child, E.T. did not scare me so much as it like really distressed me. Like, it made me viscerally upset. Not in like I hated the movie or I was too scared. Like, something about the way E.T. looks when he's sick, like 8-year-old me could not handle it. Like, that entire last 30 minutes of that movie is like incredibly distressing. And watching it as an adult, I just like cried the whole time. Like, the whole thing made me like so incredibly emotional. And I always kind of thought like, oh, that's just like people have an emotional attachment to E.T. I don't really have that because it really distressed me. But watching it last night, I was just like, oh my God, I cannot stop sobbing. What is the matter with me? So yeah, E.T., good movie. Hot take. you know?
Oh, well, Sammie, despite the fact that you just admitted to wearing socks while you sleep, you are not a psychopath
Not
because
a
you would
psychopath.
cry during ET as any normal person should. I mean, my
Yes.
God, it is incredible. Yeah, I love
My
ET.
gosh. It's so wonderful. Just wonderful, wonderful film. I know no one's ever said that before, but it must be said.
Well, I think it's good to carve out that we're not some sort of like contrarian hipster film
Yeah,
podcast
I am
because,
definitely not a contrarian hipster.
maybe that's a little more my side of this podcast, but I would like to carve out that I am firmly on the side that E.T. is a masterpiece.
Yes, it's incredible.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into some of these news items here. First, we're going to do a little film festival Berlinale roundup. That's how you say it, right? Berlinale. Immediately said it wrong.
Berlinale?
Yeah. Berlinale. Sorry.
Berlinale.
There we go. All right. So if you don't know what that is, it's Berlin's big film festival. It's one of the three biggest kind of Euro film festivals. So you've got Cannes, you've got Venice, you've got Berlin. And I think it's worth talking about just sort of what's going on at Berlin. There's a couple of interesting kind of pieces that have come out of this film festival over the past week or so. A lot having to do with politics, a lot having to do with sort of like the state of independent filmmaking that I think are definitely worth talking about. But before we get into that, I wanted to sort of talk about some of the movies, or actually one movie in particular that I'm really, really excited about. And I don't know if you have any that you want to discuss too, but I want to start us off because the most Sammie movie of all time has premiered or is premiering. I think it's already played, I'm not sure, at Berlinale, and that is Blue Moon, which is the newest movie from Richard Linklater. If you know anything about me, if you've listened to this, you know I'm like a big musical person. I did musical theater all through high school, college. Like I love musicals. I think they're wonderful. And this movie is about Lorenz Hart. So Lorenz Hart was Richard Rodgers' first lyricist. Rodgers of Rodgers and Hammerstein. They were partners for, I think, like 20 years. They wrote shows like Babes in Arms. Pal Joey is probably the biggest one, which I believe is the show that kind of launched Gene Kelly, at least on stage. And they were partners for decades, like I said, and then they weren't. And this movie takes place at the after party on the opening night of Oklahoma, kind of playing with time, like Richard Linklater is wont to do. And Oklahoma was the first show that Hammerstein did with Richard Rodgers, and it was a big hit. I'm sure everyone listening knows. It slaps so hard, but it's really good. And still, just still something that you can like still mine for decades. It's amazing.
Oh yeah.
This movie stars Andrew Scott as Richard Rodgers and Ethan Hawke, frequent Linklater collaborator, as Lorenz Hart. It also stars Margaret Qualley and Bobby Cannavale. I have never wanted a movie to be good more than I want this movie to be good. And I think there's a good chance. But one of my losers kind of has something to do with this, so I won't like say too much on it now. But this is the most Sammie movie I think I've ever heard of in my life. Just like a lyricist drunk and bemoaning his life and career.
Yeah. Written and directed by Richard Linklater. Yeah, that is the ultimate Sammie movie. Has also like really jumped out to me. I am very excited for this. I am also a big Rodgers and Hammerstein fan. And this looks fantastic. I can't wait to see this.
Me too. I'm so excited. But kind of jumping out of the movie section of this. Well, actually, do you have any movies that you were excited about kind of looking through?
Yeah, a film that really jumped out to me, it's like seemed to be like a smaller, very European offering, is a film called Late Shift by a filmmaker named Petra Volpe, who I'm not really familiar with, but it's really the subject matter that jumped out to me, which is about it's about a Swiss nurse like following her over the course of a single shift. Mostly because of my wife. Like I'm very interested. I really like medical dramas. I really like sort of like when medicine and the the humanity of it is like rendered in film. And obviously it's like a frequent subject matter, particularly on television. But this film really jumped out to me as a sort of like a tense, like thriller happening in real time, and definitely the type of thing that I would want to seek out. And it's getting pretty good reviews coming out of the festival. So yeah, Late Shift by Petra Volpe.
That looks awesome. All right. I think the one thing, you kind of put this in our roundup and I found it really interesting. Do you want to kind of tee us up for Christine Vachon's sort of interview here, big interview that she gave?
Yeah, so Christine Vachon, for those who don't know, she is the creator of Killer Films. Killer Films is one of the most prodigious and just really like forward-thinking production companies out of New York. They've been working since the 90s. She's often associated with Todd Haynes because she has directed every Todd Haynes movie ever made. But Killer Films has also produced like tons of amazing movies of the past 30 years. Everything from like Larry Clark's Kids to a more recent example is like escaping me. But anyway, she's a badass. She has an incredible book that she wrote about 10, 15 years ago called Shooting to Kill, which is about her starting Killer Films. That is probably like my indie producing Bible. I recommend it to everybody that I come into contact with. So Christine Vachon is my spirit animal. I love everything about her. She was in Berlin because Todd Haynes, I think, is getting like a Lifetime Achievement Award.
I think he's a jury president this year.
Oh, he's jury president. Okay,
I think
sorry.
So, yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Anyway, Todd Haynes is there, so she's there for her boy Todd. Basically, she's out. She's talking about in a sort of opening night interview. She's talking about sort of the changes under Trump. She's referencing that she was making movies back when Ronald Reagan was president, and how Reagan also brought a lot of fear about the effect of his policies would have on marginalized communities. Particularly the LGBTQ community, and how that created a greater sense of urgency. But she also bemoans and expresses the fears around film financing. Killer Films produced The Apprentice, and it was very hard to find American distribution financing to get the film in theaters. So I just thought that whenever Christine speaks, I think it's always really worth listening up because she has done it the right way and has done it for a really, really long time. And if she's worried about the financing situation, which is something that we've talked about a lot and a bunch of other artists are talking about at Berlin, everybody needs to pay attention, even on the lowest independent level, because if you're thinking that you're going to go out and get your film financed, well, like the people at the very top are having trouble getting their films financed, and that is the situation that we're in, and the current political climate is only adding to the uncertainty.
Yeah, no, she has a quote in here that I really liked. She said, "I feel like independent film is always at its most successful when it is a true alternative." And I feel like we've talked a lot about this kind of over the past few weeks, a lot in connection with Trump, especially since his election. But, this quote is great because I do think it's true, but I think it also, like the words true alternative, like kind of point to like a real separation, and that only, while it might be most successful, it also only makes the circumstances surrounding getting those movies harder at the same time. When she likened it to the 80s, I initially it's so funny because you sort of like think of the 80s as like blockbuster time, like big action movies, Indiana Jones, but then you look at the actual like independent film that came out of that era, and while maybe it's not as like splashy, or we don't look back on it with this sort of like reverence like we do the 70s or something like that. Like you've got Blood Simple, Sex, Lies, and Videotape, She's Gotta Have It. The Evil Dead movies came out in the 80s. Paris, Texas.
Jim Jarmusch.
All these like amazing indie filmmakers were working during that time. And they were doing it like in that big sort of blockbuster, era that the 80s were.
Yeah. And the thing that I always come back to those films, and I mean, this is kind of dabbling into like an entire different subject matter. Anyway, and I'm actually going to tie this together with another entertainment thing. Okay. I don't know if you watch any of the SNL 50 kind of
I haven't. I've been meaning to, but I have not really.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't really either because I don't like SNL. I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's funny for me. I don't really enjoy it. I liked it as a kid. But there was a variety, or no, I'm sorry, there was a New York Times profile about Lorne Michaels in the build up to SNL 50, and there was a quote that really jumped out to me from Lorne Michaels, which is the article says this. It says, over the years, some critics have wondered if you can be a multimillionaire and run a satirical comedy show that's supposed to challenge power. Michaels shot back on this point and said, they've said this so many different ways since season 2. We're a comedy variety show, and each generation has what they think is funny, and music keeps changing, and we're still on the air. And then he added this line, which is so telling. Our audience is mostly rich now.
That's probably true.
It is true.
Yeah.
And this is like the ultimate problem with like, not leftism, but like liberalism. And what is really like neoliberalism, the sort of neoliberal like center of American democratic policies. And the thing that like when I think about Christine Vachon talking about like movies and independent film providing a true alternative, I think that like, and it's a little hard to say this within the context of like a European film festival, which is in many ways like the snobbiest thing that you can imagine. But like films need to talk to like more than just rich people. Films need to talk to people, need to go across class. And like all those films from the 80s that you're talking about, while the whole like Reagan boom of the 80s was happening and the yuppie culture was like taking off, is that people were actually like talking about what it meant to be poor. And films were about people who were poor, and they like related to people on an actual level who were in disadvantaged social classes. And it's something that I think in many ways is missing right now.
Yeah, no, that I totally agree. It's funny you bring up the SNL thing, because that is like, that dichotomy is like, or contrast, I guess, and tension is like why the SNL movie doesn't work. Because like, and I get that at one point, like it was like a question of, will this work? But you're watching that movie about like the first night of SNL. It's just called Saturday Night. And like, you're just watching it and you're like, well, I know this worked. And it's like so establishment now. It's hard to like, think of it as like countercultural. And that's, I think, why that movie, and I also think that movie is a little overinvested in its own importance. But like, that is like part of why that movie doesn't really stick, I think.
I think that's part of why SNL doesn't stick right now, because, and what's so disjointed, and granted, of course, it's a new movie. I didn't see it, but, but like those first few seasons of SNL, like that was entertainment for like, not for rich people. And SNL has evolved over the years to become entertainment for rich people, an entertainment that makes you go, rather than like side-splitting laughter at people like really thumbing their noses at convention. It's become convention, and it's just ugh. Yeah.
Do you want to get into our winners and losers? How should we do this?
Yeah, totally. Let's go back and forth here. We're going to get into some winners of losers so far of Berlinale. It's still going on. The snowy streets of Berlin are still popping. But let's jump in and go with some winners thus far from the festival. I'm going to go out with my first winner. And my first winner is Mr. Festival 2025, John Magaro. John Magaro he has become like, if you want a festival film, like you got to get this actor. He is like, he is the most unassuming it man, like leading man actor. But it's amazing. He's in this new film called Cone 75, where he plays jazz musician Keith Garrett, who is a completely improvisational jazz musician who recorded this very famous concert for an album, and then that album became like the greatest selling jazz album of all time. And anyway, you've probably seen it. He was in The Big Short. He of course was in Kelly Reichardt's First Cow. He just had a big Sundance movie. Showing up too. Yeah, he's like Kelly Reichardt's like go-to guy.
Past Lives, that was Sundance. Like he's Sundance
Past
boy.
Lives, Mr. Sundance, and then Omaha this past year. So John Magaro just like absolutely crushing it, and now he's got this like really he plays a cool jazz musician in this cool Euro art film. I mean, he's riding high.
I totally, he like, I really like him as an actor, and I liked Omaha. I think mostly that for the fact that it sort of allowed him to play like a tougher side. I've never really seen him play like kind of I mean, he's not like tough. It's still a very sensitive performance, but like he plays like a little bit of a gruffer side. But yeah, I don't think your movie really like, does your movie exist at a festival if John Magaro isn't in it? Tough to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
My first winner, and the way you said this for a minute, I was like, oh my God, but no. My first winner is the PR campaign that never stops, and that is Timothée Chalamet and the A Complete Unknown PR Oscar campaign. Even if
I'm glad you said it so I didn't have to.
Even if he doesn't win the Oscar at this point, like he's won. He's like reached, I think, a level of popularity. And the fact that there's like a special gala for A Complete Unknown and it's been out for so, like, you know what I mean? Like,
what is happening?
What's happening? Like, but he's just like out there dating a Kardashian, like looking, he's like his style. I mean, he's always been a good dresser, but like style has been really on point lately. Like, I'm just like this. I've never, like, obviously like PR campaigns are like a staple of awards season. This isn't anything new, but I'm also like, how like he seems to be everywhere, and then he's just like in Berlin like a week and a half before the Oscars. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. But, no, I mean it is masterful. I'm glad you mentioned it so that I didn't have to. I was counting on you for that, so thank you.
You're welcome.
My real question is, when does the Kardashian curse come for Timothée Chalamet, or does he have the juice to overcome it? Because I think that pride is greatest before the fall, and it's got to be coming, right? Do you know who Club Chalamet is? No, definitely not.
Okay, so Club Chalamet is like the number one Timmy Stan account on social media. She is, I believe, in her 50s. Don't quote me on that, but she's like an older woman who is she loves Timmy. And it's funny that you said that because she hates she hates Kylie so much. It's like when they first started dating, like she was like, this will never last. This is so unserious. And now it's like 2 years later. I feel like it's been a pretty long time. So I don't know. He's managed to avoid it for like a long time. So we'll see. We'll see how long that can keep up.
Yeah, I don't know. I think every Kardashian spouse or date, like you have it's kind of like you have a picture of Dorian Gray situation, but in association with your Kardashian. So I feel at some point the truth will come out.
Yeah, I feel like he hasn't appeared on the show, which I don't know if he's actually had a chance to. I don't keep up with the Kardashians, as it were. But he has not appeared on the show, I'm pretty sure. And I wonder if that's like the real curse. Like as soon as you're on the show, you're done. Because even like Kanye appeared on that show, which is kind of wild when you think about it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, and he's doing great.
But just like level of fame wise, I was like kind of shocked when he you know what I mean? Yeah. But I don't know. We'll see.
Praying for you, Timmy. Let's stay on the straight and narrow here. Okay, I'm gonna go with my next winner. My next winner is Hong Sang-soo. Are you a Hong Sang-soo girly?
I'm not a girly, but I like the film that I've seen, which is, hold on, let me pull up.
Is it A Traveler's Needs with Isabella Huppert?
No, it's oh my God, this is gonna bother me so much. What's it called? It's the one about oh my God. It's the one with the girl from The Handmaiden.
Yeah, Kim Min-hee, but that's his partner. Yeah. She's in like all of his movies.
Yes, and they had like that huge scandal with there's
a whole scandal.
Yeah. But I've seen the one it's On the Beach at Night Alone. There we go.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Mm-hmm. Great pull, because the titles of his movies are like impossible to
remember. It's all like I'm looking at them now and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, they're all poetic and sort of like hard to stick, but that's also like his whole thing. But anyway, Hong Sang-soo, if you're unfamiliar, he's a Korean filmmaker. He's been working since the 90s. Mm-hmm. But he's getting older, but this is his 5th straight year of playing Berlin. For 5 straight years since 2020, he has made 2 films a year, and for each one of them, he has written, directed, produced, edited, photographed, and scored. So he's like transitioned in his old age into being a true like DIY one-man band. I guess he doesn't run sound, but like he does everything. It is amazing. All of his movies are like very slice of life, modern portraits. Like this movie he's playing that just is premiering this year is called What Does That Nature Say to You? And the log line is fantastic. This is the log line. A young poet takes his girlfriend to her parents' home and is stunned by its sublimity. He encounters her father, meets her mother and sister, and they all spend an extended day together filled with lively conversation, delicious food, and drinks.
Wow, that sounds nice.
It sounds wonderful. I mean, I really think that Hong Sang-soo in many ways is sort of he might be kind of a harbinger of the future of DIY filmmaking. Filmmaking has only become more and more accessible, and I think I don't think everyone can be a Hong Sang-soo, but I think in 50 years there will be more people following the Hong Sang-soo model than there will be people, following a sort of like climbing the ladder Hollywood model. And so he's really a trailblazer in that regard, and I just love to see it because his movies are fabulous, tender, and special.
I've really got to watch more of them. Gotta jump. There's so much to watch. I was bemoaning this to someone else the other day, but all right. So my next one is Mickey 17. Getting good reviews. And
getting good reviews. David Ehrlich loved it.
Listen, getting good reviews. He's a tough cookie too. This movie was delayed so much. And there's that moment, I think it was pushed back from like early 2024 to January of this year. And, January, you get the sense that like, oh, people don't believe in this, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, this man won Best Picture. What are we doing? It's Bong Joon-ho's new film. I don't think I said that before. And it's now set for April, I believe, which is like, okay, all right. Like, I'm pumped. I'm so excited. He won, I remember just being so like disenchanted with everything when this movie was kind of theoretically like being a little dumped, which is the sense you get from January, which is dumpuary, which like is a term that has, well, at least when I use it, nothing to do with the quality of the films. It's just like a lot of films are dumped by studios in kind of January, February if they don't think they're going to do that well. I'm guessing everyone listening to this probably knows what that means, but just in case. And so when Mickey 17 was put there, I was sort of like, oh, come on. Like this, like Parasite was such a revelation, not only in like being a good movie, but just like the amount of people that went out and saw that movie who like my parents were interested in that movie. Like they don't know anything about Bong Joon-ho or like South Korean cinema or whatever it might be, And so to think that that guy's next movie was sort of being dumped, his next movie with like a big star in Robert Pattinson was very disappointing, but apparently it's pretty good. I'm really excited. I can't wait to see this movie.
Yeah, well, you took mine. My third winner was Bong Joon-ho with Mickey 17. So I mean, this movie it started shooting so after Parasite won Best Picture in 2020. The
last good thing.
In 2020, this film like was developed and then greenlit. It was shot in 2022. So we've been like reading about Mickey 17 now for 3 years.
Almost 3 years, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little crazy. I think reading a few more reviews, I think that some of the political content and some of the pretty direct visual representations. I mean, he's got like a demagogic cult leader whose followers wear red hats. I mean, like,
sure.
Come on. Yeah. So I would imagine that maybe that had some sort of influence on it. I don't know why releasing it now would be like better as opposed to last year, but. I kind of got the feeling that's what's going on. If you like Bong Joon-ho's earlier stuff, if you like Parasite, if you like Snowpiercer, if you like Okja, everything David Ehrlich says is that you're gonna love this movie. I actually don't like those movies, so I will probably not be a fan. But I'm happy for Bong Joon-ho, and I do want to see this film get the release that it deserves.
This is a very silly thing to say, and I recognize that, but Okja is part of the reason I stopped eating meat. I was I was on the fence
That's
before,
amazing.
And then like that movie really hit me kind of right in my stomach, and I was like, yeah, and I stopped. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible, Sammie. That is a real power. That is the power of cinema.
Power of cinema, honestly. Yeah.
Well, no,
true.
I was just talking about this me and Shub were talking about this the other day. We were grabbing lunch somewhere, and there's a dad with his two kids, and he was taking his kids out for lunch or whatever, and I asked Chip, I was like, hey, like, do you ever think about like how much more like kids with their dads like you see out? Because like I take my daughter to the playground all the time, and sometimes like it's majority dads with their kids, and I recalled back that I think in oh god in one of the like screenwriting books, like maybe Robert McKee's Story, or one of those screenwriting books, there's like some statistical evidence that everything that the trend of more time between fathers and kids is directly attributable to Kramer versus Kramer.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
And that like after Kramer versus Kramer came out, which was like a huge movie in 79, I think, or 1980, it was the number one movie of the year.
Yeah.
And like the fact that you see Dustin Hoffman like choosing his kid over his career, and like the benefits of that, that it had almost a real, or it seems to have a real statistical impact. So anyway,
wow.
Thank you.
Power of Kramer versus Kramer.
The power of Kramer versus Kramer, and the power of Okja, apparently.
Yeah, really. All right, since Bong was your last winner, I'll go through my last winner, which is Tilda Swinton, of course. I feel like she can be like one named. Like you can just say Tilda and everyone's like, yeah, I got that. But so Tilda Swinton basically used, she was awarded with a Lifetime Achievement Award, I believe, while she was at Berlinale. She has a real long history with the festival. Her screen debut, Caravaggio, I believe debuted there, and she's had 26 films play at the festival in her career. And kind of in this, it's a lot. In this speech that she gave, she sort of talked about feeling like she was looking for something different. So she's not retiring, so we don't need to like have a big freak out. I also never believe people when they say they're retiring, but she did not say she's retiring. She just said she's kind of going to take a break. To me, it kind of feels like she's sort of looking to like be a little inspired again, like by whatever it might be, and kind of figuring out how the next like 40 years of her life and career will sort of shake out, which more power to her, makes a ton of sense. And part of the reason she talks about kind of wanting to take that break now is the way that the movies she likes to make are made, whether that be like an indie film or kind of a director forward sort of picture. She essentially says that the way the movies she wants to make are made are not so artist friendly anymore. And I think this kind of goes back to sort of how Christine Barshon was sort of talking about like the troubles getting things financed and like, not having a lot of time. She talks sort of in this piece about like, you used to have like time to work on these things and it was like collaborative and there was a lot of like rehearsal, et cetera, and things are so truncated and like things are, we're trying to get things made as fast as possible. And so it was interesting to kind of hear someone like Tilda, who I think is a real like icon of acting and kind of icon of independent cinema, sort of talk about, the troubles of financing so frankly like that. Another thing that Tilda Swinton sort of talked about at this festival were her motivations for attending the festival. So this BDS, the BDS movement, which is the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, which is sort of working to end international support for Israel's oppression of Palestinians, called for a boycott of Berlinale this year over the war in Gaza. And I really appreciated, if you have followed kind of Tilda Swinton's, I guess, like political sort of leaning, she's like been pretty outspoken about Palestinian freedom for quite some time. And she talked a lot about her decision to show up anyway. And her big quote, which I really admired, was she essentially said it was more useful for the cause for her to show up and talk about this, but she did it in such a way where she did not dismiss the aims of the boycott at all, which I thought was like quite classy. And you can tell like she's thought a lot about this and has an actual thought and feeling over how to approach issues like this. And just because she might disagree with people on the same side of the issue, it doesn't mean that she like needs to bash or do anything like that, which I quite respected. And her quote, let me find it here. So she said, "I'm here today and yesterday and tomorrow and the next day because I decided to come. I decided it was more important for me to come. I was given, thanks to the festival, a platform which I decided in a personal moment was potentially more useful to all our causes than me not turning up at all. It was a personal judgment call that I take full responsibility for. And I just really I think we talked about this a little while ago. I can't remember which festival it was, but there were calls. Do you remember what I'm talking about? There were calls for a boycott. It was a
Yeah.
cinematography
Yeah.
festival. Yeah.
Camera image.
Mm-hmm. And we sort of talked about like the kind of what is more of a powerful statement, like pulling a film out like Steve McQueen did, or showing up and like taking the opportunity to talk about it. And I really appreciate Tilda's willingness to show up and actually talk about it, and also like sort of the classy way she handled discussion of the boycott at all.
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm going to use this to transition directly into my losers column, because my number one loser was organized boycott. For all the exact reasons that you listed. I mean, look, I was thinking about this. One of the things that I love about living in Atlanta and all the resources that we have to learn about the civil rights movement, specifically like the Dr. King portion of the civil rights movement here in the United States, is you realize like how hyper focused every effort was, and how much that in the modern era, so many efforts towards social change, mass movements towards social change, particularly in a more leftist perspective, are very scattershot. In some ways, I think a little superficial. And I think that the era of the superficial boycott is over. The simply just I'm not showing up and that enough is going to be a statement, because there is just too much happening all the time. If you don't show up in the era of social media, then you will just simply not be talked about. No one cares that you don't show up. Like, you not showing up will not become a major headline. And even if it is a headline, it's going to disappear in the feed so quickly that the gesture and the potential power that could come from that gesture are, I think, they've never been less impactful. Now, of course, I juxtapose that to sort of like a kind of boycott model that I think could really work, which is like what Dr. King, utilized in the 1960s was a boycott that actually affected the pocketbook of the powers that be, that actually affected the money-making capability of the institution that you were trying to change. That type of boycott, I think, could still be incredibly effective. If anything, the voice of the dollar has never been more powerful. But I completely agree. I thought I was very inspired and very moved by Tilda Swinton showing up and speaking about these issues. I think it was absolutely the right thing. And you mentioned it, Cate Blanchett showed up as the jury president of Camera Image after their whole sexism scandal. And I thought that her showing up and doing that ultimately said way more and framed the issue far more effectively than just saying like, I'm out. And it really has a lot to do with our sort of modern media environment. And for anybody who's looking to like affect change at an institutional level, I think that the boycott model, if it's not going to hit a pocketbook, needs to be thrown out, and much more meaningful discourse needs to take place.
Yeah, no, I think, like you said, I think boycotts can obviously be effective. I do think there's sort of, like you said, in the age of social media, I don't know if these things can really help, but like be scattered. Like, it takes a lot of effort to like focus movements and actually, affect change through those movements in an age where things are so incredibly scattered. And like you said, there's so much going on at once. So I really commend her for kind of sticking to her guns and just being willing to openly talk about it. And like I said, like, I thought the way she talked about the boycott movement was like incredibly like kind and gracious as well. Like, she just seems like a real one, as the kids say.
Yes, totally. Well, let's move on. What you got some losers for us, Sammie? Let's get some losers.
I got a couple losers. So this is sort of a personal loser. And we talked a little, because it might be like a winner in theory, but we talked a little bit about this with Sundance last week with our whole indie TV conversation. But my loser is TV at festivals. And again, it's sort of a personal thing. So Berlinale this year is screening 2 episodes of a new series called The Narrow Road to the Deep North. It stars Jacob Elordi. I believe it's a World War II story.
It is.
I didn't see... So... I I didn't see any TV at Sundance. There were plenty of opportunities too, but I was just sort of like, it's not the whole thing. It's hard to like form, I don't know. I've always found reviewing TV to be much more difficult than reviewing movies, mostly because whenever you get the opportunity to review TV, you're essentially asked to review like the first two episodes. And then I just find it like very difficult because, TV shows are a different bear. Like you're not really getting a bear, haha. You're not really getting like the entirety of what that story is in those first two episodes. You might know if you want to watch more. And I think that's, an effective thing, or like what's the word I'm looking for? That's an important thing to know and, talk about in a TV review. But I just don't know if like a festival is really the place to debut a TV show. I don't know. Again, this is sort of like a personal, I just don't think I would want to see like the first two episodes of a TV show in a movie theater and then have to go home and like wait for it to come out or watch it on my own television. Seems like a little jarring to me.
Yeah. I totally agree. I think it even gets back to some of the issues around sort of like populism and elitism. The great thing about some of those amazing TV shows from the last 15 years that captivated such a wide audience, at least in America, is that they really they gained their credibility and really had a broad populist appeal across political divides, across class divides. I'm thinking, of course, I'm thinking like Breaking Bad, Sopranos, The Wire, Game of Thrones, even. Like, I think prestige TV is marked by a certain sort of populism and accessibility that has come to define television, and the sort of cloistered, effete world of European cinemas or European cinema festivals doesn't necessarily lend that to a TV show, even though I was excited about the potential of watching this Jacob Elordi TV show.
It looks
cool,
good.
but
it looks good. I just don't know if I would want to like watch it. I don't know. There's just something like
I don't think it's the right intro. But it's also, it speaks to the failure of the streaming platforms to like effectively mass market and to effectively turn their television shows into something that is, I mean, we've talked about this at so many times, to turn them into as big of a thing as like HBO of old, AMC of old. So I don't know. I mean, I appreciate them for trying, but I totally agree with you that it doesn't quite give the right introduction.
Yeah. All right. You have two more losers. Is that right?
Yes. I have two more losers. Okay, the first loser that I have, I'll try to get through quickly because I know we've been taking a while.
We haven't in a while.
Okay, but this isn't even really a loser, but I think it's sort of a loser. Okay, I think we're at peak older woman, younger man film. Okay, like this has become a genre unto itself. And I speak all of this because Michelle Franco's new film Dreams stars Jessica Chastain. She's a wealthy San Francisco socialite having a passionate romance with a ballet dancer played by Isaac Hernandez, who has crossed the border illegally from Mexico. Ooh, drama. So, and it's a torrid older woman, younger man drama that could be this year's Baby Girl. And look, I mean, in the past several years, we've had Baby Girl, The Idea of You with Anne Hathaway, May December, Todd Haynes. Maybe even No Hard Feelings could like fit into this, like J-Law movie.
It's a little different, but yeah.
A little different, but still. And then coming up, we got the new Bridget Jones coming out. That's older woman, younger man. We got All Fours, Miranda July's book just sold. Also older, younger man. We got this movie with Jessica Chastain. She's taking her turn, robbing the cradle. And I'm not saying these are bad films, but like, I was just thinking like, it's just so weird that like, it's so hard to hit the bullseye, like the space in the middle of the Venn diagram, where a movie can be taboo enough to be titillating and erotic and drive interest, but not taboo enough that it engenders like the rage of the majority of the population, right? And for some reason, older woman, younger man is the only thing that hits the middle of that Venn diagram right now. And I just think, and of course the target's always moving and people will get bored of this. And usually once Hollywood like finds the formula, like that formula for that particular time, they just hammer it and hammer it and hammer it until everyone gets bored. And so anyway, I just think that we're potentially reaching peak older woman, younger man. I find it sort of I just find it sort of interesting and bizarre as a phenomenon. So this isn't really like a loser, because I think older woman, younger man is going to keep winning. But ultimately I just find it a very strange Hollywood phenomena that we are in the midst of.
I think we shouldn't stop until we get to the point where it's like how Cary Grant would play opposite Audrey Hepburn. Like, it's not actually about the age gap. It's just like, Helen Mirren and Jacob Elordi starring in a rom-com. That's what I think the platonic ideal is.
So you want all your films to be Helen Mirren, Jacob Elordi? Like,
honestly, kind of sounds fun. But,
digging up B. Arthur.
I guess I'm just not. It was mostly a joke. This doesn't like bother me quite as much. I do see what you're saying about like this is sort of the ideal of like it's still titillating, but like you're not like quite skeeved out, because like the gender like dynamic kind of like power is like played with in an interesting way, I guess. So like people can kind of like watch it through a different lens. Is that what you're sort of saying?
I think I would agree, but ultimately like power is power, and it's just because there's a certain novelty to this that is a very post Me Too novelty that plays to a population where like more women are upwardly mobile than ever before. We have more women in universities than men. Like women are are gaining more power across the board, and so this kind of like accentuates like certain fantasies, and also like it plays to younger women. They're like fascinated by it, by that they could be this when they're older, but also older women who are sort of like second or third wave feminist women I think enjoy it well. So it has a kind of cross generational appeal. I don't know. I guess as a man, I wish there was a little more variety in like the titillating like acceptability. But I don't know. I think it's more just like an interested. I don't know. I'm more just interested in the phenomenon. Tar, I also totally didn't mention in this as well, which I absolutely loved.
Yeah, I guess it just. And the ones that I've seen, I do feel like there's like a little bit of variety within the stories at the center, I guess. Like they all have
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, this is like this is simply the titillating package to then deliver like totally different storied content. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I'm totally with you. I'm not saying all these movies are the same by any way, shape, or form.
Gotcha.
It's a very interesting marketing package.
Yeah.
That is like offer that chums the water and then gets you in, because like this movie with Jessica Chastain, like this is about immigration issues, it's about power dynamics, it's about race, but it's sold as like, but she's older and he's younger.
Gotta get those people in the door. Yeah, I guess it doesn't. I kind of hope they keep making them, but maybe I'm the target audience. But I have one more loser, and that's overthinking the Oscars. I know I just said how excited I am for Blue Moon, but in this little BBC roundup that we've sort of been looking at for Berlinale, it's like, is it too soon to start thinking about the 2026 Oscars? And I'm like, yes, please don't jinx Blue Moon's chances right now. That's bad. But also, I just like, we need to like chill out a little. I as much as I like enjoy the Oscars, we're going to have a little Oscars party. It's going to be so fun. I can't wait. As much as I enjoy the drama, the campaigning, et cetera, I don't think it is like ultimately a very healthy way to think about film in terms of awards. And I get it when it's happening during actual award season, but like, let's slow down a little bit. Let's chill out. We don't need to do it right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. Love that take. Love that take. My last loser, and you don't have a third one, right?
I don't have a third one. Yeah.
I think this is a good way to end it. Okay, my last loser is American moviegoers, because seeing the number of internationally produced and co-produced films getting distribution deals in the European market compared to like the abysmal sales at Sundance really just underscores like how tight and how frustrating the American distribution landscape is, and just how superior Europe is in this one area in particular. And it's frustrating. Although I do hope to see many of these movies either on Criterion or Mubi or wherever they land on streaming eventually.
I'll be watching them. That's for sure. oh, I get so jealous of everyone at like Berlin, Cannes, Venice. I'm like, please send me there.
Yeah, you'll get there
It's
soon.
so fun. One day, one day. All right, let's leave Berlinale in the dust. Wish I was there. Wish I was with you.
In the
And
snow.
we're going to talk about something a lot more local. So I don't know. You sent this to me, and I wondered if you wanted to sort of tee it up. I've been watching like Instagram reels and lives and like diving into this stuff, but your Aaron, I don't know if everyone knows this, has acted as well. So like this is probably something as far as like self-tape and interviews or not interviews, auditions, journalist brain came on that you're like far more intimately familiar with. So I wanted to see if you would like to tee us up a little bit.
Sure. Okay. So let's set the scene a little bit. I'm scrolling on my Instagram as I am wont to do. About 3 weeks ago, I probably had just closed Instagram and then reopened it because that's the power that it has on my brain. Someone who posts on Instagram a lot. Anyway, and it comes across my feed, a little clip from a podcast featuring a woman that I'm very familiar with, which is the local casting director for Tyler Perry Studios, a woman by the name of Raven Drummer. And she is talking to another casting director, a woman named Tiffany Richey, who's also cast for Tyler Perry. I think she was Raven's assistant for a little bit of time, but she's now also gone out and gotten CD credits on her own for BET. And they selectively posted this clip onto their Instagram feed. And it's a podcast with a very high production value. Yeah, they chose this. Very high production value, and they look very fancy and sort of all set up. And Raven asked Tiffany, she says basically, how long does it take you before you know whether or not you're going to cast this person? And Tiffany says, I only watch the first 4 seconds. And then they start laughing, and Tiffany laughs, and Raven laughs, and then they laugh and laugh and laugh. And Tiffany doubles down. She says, does it take you 4 seconds to know if someone's your Amazon driver or your doctor? No, that's all you need to watch. And they put this clip out there. And let's just say the results were fast and very verbose.
Yeah.
By the time I saw this reel, it had several hundred comments, mostly from actors saying, this is so offensive. I can't believe you would say this. As someone who has been on the receiving end of many a multi-page Raven Drummer audition, it feels it pissed me off.
Yeah.
If you're going to openly come out here and laugh about only watching the first 4 seconds of an actor's self-tape, it's just a spit in the face to all the work that you are asking people to do. Work that is unpaid. These are just job interviews that makes up the majority of an actor's life. And I think really I'm going to go off on a little rant here, Sammie, and then I'll hand the mic over to you.
Okay.
I know I want to rant, but
Sure.
people really need to understand just how much it sucks to be an actor in 2025.
Yeah.
First of all, this is a job that you, even the best of us, the top 1% are working maybe 20 to 30 days a year. If you're if you're not an actor who is secured, a recurring role on a television show. Okay. So only and it's only 0.01% of people that actually can pay their bills from this job. Okay. And it's a job where you're completely dependent upon others. Yes, you can go out and write and direct and shoot and organize your own short films, but for the majority of acting, in a television or a TV show, you're completely dependent upon others' work, people's platforms for your success. You have so little agency. It's not a meritocracy. Unlike what most people would want to say, casting is a weird process. It's determined by politics and money and marketing and individual biases. And the worst thing about it is that when I started off as an actor 15 years ago, the job of a casting director was not just to have taste in determining who would be good for a role to present to a production team, but you had to host actors. You had to invite them. You had to secure a safe space for them to come in. They would come to your office. You had to make sure that they were comfortable. You had to make sure that they came in and out in an efficient manner. They walked into the room. You had to have a camera set up. You had a reader with you to read the scene with the actor. You gave the actor notes and feedback in that room. And it was actually working in the room together between a casting director and an actor was far more akin to the work that actually happens on a film set between an actor and a director. But one of the worst things that the Atlanta market brought to the world of film and television is that they brought in this the convenience of self-taping, which is that instead of providing all of these things to an actor, a casting director could simply say, "You send me a self-tape." And this worked very well when Atlanta was trying to establish itself as a market because it was casting this really wide net across the Southeast. Not everyone could come to Atlanta and audition in person. And it's nice for the casting directors because they can turn around to production and say, hey, we're scouring the globe, for the absolute best talent. We're not leaving any stone unturned. And of course, isn't it so convenient, actors? Isn't it so convenient that you can go and you can do the self-tape on your own? But it puts such a burden of work onto the actor. Now, all of a sudden, you need to have professional camera, professional lighting. You need to find a reader. You need to find all this. This has created an entire economy, like in this city and now all over the world, where there's taping service, taping coaching, lighting setups, like all for these self-tapes. It is such a burden. You have put so much burden on the actor, on top of the fact that they have to sometimes memorize a 10-page scene on a 48-hour turnaround just to go to audition for your stupid Tyler Perry show. I mean, it is absolutely offensive to do this. So for Raven Drummer and Tiffany Richey to then present themselves in this very we're better than you manner and laugh about only watching 4 seconds of the tape. And I get what they were trying to go to. I get what they were trying to speak to. Look, like I've been on the other side of the casting many times. Yeah. I understand what they mean about first impressions and the moments before, but it is such the wrong tone to strike. And I know that they did a lot. They have since tried to contain this fire. And I'll shut up here before I say anything more. But it really, really struck a nerve, and they should know better. They should just know better.
I agree. And I did want to discuss sort of their response, because I do want to give them credit for not just, I guess, releasing a statement and sort of inviting conversation. So after this kind of blew up, they had another Instagram live, or not another, that clip was from a podcast, but they had an Instagram live where they invited a couple of local actors, Angela Davis and Chris Green, who were both pretty vocal in their opposition to what was said on the podcast. They invited them on this Instagram live to just basically talk through why everybody got so upset about what was said, which is kind of, I hear that and I'm kind of like, well, if you don't know. And so I do want to sort of give them credit for being open to having that conversation. I think that is something that's needed a lot more in our world. So I do want to kind of shout them out for that. And, a lot of what Chris and Angela sort of said they said a lot of things and a lot of really smart things. I think we should post a link to it if anyone wants to go watch it. I think it's pretty long, but it's worth a watch. One of the things they sort of said was it wasn't necessarily what you said, although that is a little part of it. It's kind of the flippantness with which you said it and kind of the laughing and the brushing it off. And we understand, and kind of speaking what I'm speaking as them now, kind of saying what they were saying. They were like, we get that your job is time consuming. You have a lot of tapes you have to watch. You have a lot of auditions you have to get through. Totally understand that. But I can see personally as a casting director, you might be like, I get what this is sort of after a few minutes. And of course, first impressions are important, but to be so flippant about the work that goes into doing this and the money that goes into doing it, frankly, is really what rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is their stupid comments are symptomatic of a systemic problem, which is why I tried to set the scene of what casting was like only 10 years ago and just how much of a different thing. When you're inviting people into your office, it automatically limits the number of people that you can bring in, because you have like it's like the same problem we have with streaming, is that when you're bound by linear time, you're actually able to give like more care and attention to the things. But when you're unbound by like limitless tapes, the casting director becomes overwhelmed. They're not giving the attention. They don't have the relationships with the actors. The studios themselves use this self-taping system and use the Atlanta market they don't want anyone outside of a very specific group of actors. They don't want anyone to like rise up the chain of actor from co-star to guest star to recurring character, because that means that actor is going to ask for an increased pay raise. If you hide behind the electronic wall of self-taping and no one knows what's going on and no one has relationships with the casting directors don't even have relationships with the production. The casting directors are promising production that they're going to keep, they're never going to advocate for actor pay raises. Like, it creates a disenfranchising and dehumanizing system. And ultimately, Raven Drummer and Tiffany Richey laughing in a very dehumanizing way that they're only watching 4 seconds of anybody's work is symptomatic of this like greater problem of how we cultivate, respect, and find talent within film and television. But but they're part of that problem, and it's really bad. And even the people that participated in the live, the fact that one of them spun this, and I won't say who, but you can watch the live and find out, the fact that one of them spun this into like, well, what they're really trying to say is that you need to pay more attention to your first 4 seconds of your audition tape, and to learn more about working on the moment before, you need to come join my acting class. It's like, that's part of the problem too. I have been so disheartened and so upset by the fact that actors are so manipulated by the hope machine, and they're manipulated by each other. Because if you're a smart actor, you know how to sell the dream that has like probably shriveled and died in your heart, but you know how to sell it to younger actors to like get them into your acting class, because that's the real way that you pay your bills. And it's like all this very cyclical manipulative system that I find really, it really bothers me, and it makes one not want to participate, to be honest. And so to see Raven and Tiffany laughing about it, it really, like, this is the wound that they're twisting a knife in. And for any actor that has been in the game for like longer than 5 years, you know how bad this hurts.
Yeah, one thing that came up that I found, and you sort of touched on this a little bit, but just like, this is all kind of also like symptomatic of the way that the Atlanta market is sort of treated as inferior, I think, as well. One of the things that kind of came up, and I don't know like enough about the way like auditions and TV and like what a recurring, what a blah 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 guest, what all that means on a TV show. But one of the phrases that came up, I think it was heavy recurring, if I'm not mistaken. And one of the actors on the call, I can't remember who, but they were talking about like how that is only a thing in the Atlanta region and only used to justify like paying less than the actor deserves. And that's like there is like a larger like kind of issue that comes out of this, is like of like Atlanta kind of being seen as an inferior market, and actors in that market like not being paid as much as their LA or New York counterparts, which I think is like all of this, like the flippant attitude, everything that you just mentioned, like contributes to that becoming like and staying the prevailing view of the Atlanta and like greater Southeastern market.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't even the first casting director to put their foot in their mouth over a direct issue. This speaks to 3 years ago, casting director Tara Feldstein decided it was a good idea to enter into a Twitter fight after actors were posting on Twitter demanding better pay scales, saying that they were saying it's ridiculous that I am going on to set for a show where my casting director in the posting said, you will never get above SAG minimum plus 10, which for a television show is basically $1,000 per day to the actor. And then your 10% agency fee is then covered by production. Mm-hmm. So 1,000 plus 10. But they're going on to set and they're talking to actors from LA who maybe even have less credits than they do. And their casting director and agent negotiated them a much higher payday. And so Atlanta actors were on Twitter talking about this, and Tara Feldstein thought it was a good idea to chime in and said, quote, "It's ridiculous for actors to complain about only making scale plus 10 because that's $1,000 a day. Like, how dare you thumb your nose at $1,000 a day?" It's like, lady, first of all, that $1,000 is paying for my years of training, my years of classes, my taping supplies, my multiple rounds of self-tapes that I sent to you, the months that I wasn't working. And then, ultimately, like, I only worked for 20 to 30 days this year, and that made me a successful actor.
Yeah.
Okay. So like no one in this talent pool is making $1,000 200 days work days out of the year. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that then she engaged in this Twitter fight more. It blew up.
I was reading back through this. I was like, oh my God, just
oh my God,
like,
shut
stop.
up. Yeah, just stop. And what's so crazy is that Feldstein Paris cornered the Atlanta television casting market by undercutting everybody else's casting fees. They charged lower than everybody else, and they promised studios in Los Angeles and New York that they would never advocate for the Atlanta actors to make above minimum plus 10. That was their guarantee. Like, we are on management side, and we will make sure that that is never an option within this market. And so it's very frustrating because for as long as I've lived and worked here in Atlanta, there's always been there's been a lot of talk about, like, how do we raise this market? How do we really take over that mantle? But to be honest, if anyone is in LA and New York listening to this and sort of patting themselves on the back and feeling superior, Atlanta is on the leading edge of all these innovations. Atlanta is the market that invented tax incentives that all of you have copied, and Atlanta is the market that has invented actor disenfranchisement, which I guarantee all of you are copying. So unfortunately, this is the state of labor relations between actors. It ultimately comes down, just like all the problems in film and television, is that there is an oversupply of people who want to do this and a lack of demand and a lack of opportunity. And when you have that supply and opportunity imbalance, you get to treat people like garbage. It's very frustrating and it's very disheartening.
Yeah, no, the whole thing is extremely frustrating. This is a little bit of a tangent, but reading this reminded me of it was kind of during like right when COVID started. It was a director. I don't know if they've ever figured out what director it was. I don't know if it's ever been confirmed. But it was a Zoom audition for this director with actor Lucas Gage, who, like, shout out to him, because ever since this video dropped, I think you know what I'm talking about, his career's taken off. He's like he was in Companion, like he was great, like, you know, like, so kudos to that guy. But it was a Zoom audition, and the director of whatever project this was did not know that his mic was on. And as you know, Lucas Gage is like getting ready to start the audition, and you just hear this guy break in with, "Where are they even filming these now? Like, look at this like crappy apartment," like something along like those lines. And like you see, like he kind of like freezes, like he's like, "Oh God," and then says something like, "Well, maybe if you give me this role, I'll get some money and I can buy a better apartment." And I remember that kind of breaking, and like people being like, "Oh, auditions suck. No one actually cares about you who's like watching you." It's like, kind of, when you think about it, like one of the most like dehumanizing things you can kind of go through. Like, I think there's a musical called The Last 5 Years that has like a pretty infamous audition song where the woman is auditioning, and she's sort of just like running kind of stream of consciousness in her head about like, why is that guy staring at my shoes? Like, why is he looking at my resume? Why is this pianist like effing me over? Like, why is no one paying attention to me? And then they like cut her off before she ends. Like, you know what I mean? It's like a really dehumanizing endeavor, I think. And stuff like this, the like environment that it's taking place in and that getting progressively worse is only making that dehumanization worse.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's not to say that the old days were perfect by any means.
Sure.
I mean, I can remember so many instances of my first 5 years working as an actor of all this
Yeah.
of all the stuff, people eating in your audition, people checking their phones while you're auditioning,
Yeah.
people talking while you're auditioning, you getting cut off and told to leave the room like before
Yeah.
it's done. Ultimately, like all that sort of behavior is probably like if you don't get cast by them, then like you dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
And I will say there's a book. Oh, and I'm like referencing multiple filmmaking books today. There's a book that describes like auditioning actors is the most horrible, dehumanizing thing, and unfortunately, it's the best way we've ever figured out to like fill these jobs.
I don't know what the alternative is. I just like always think about it, and I'm like, oh, like I hated auditioning when I was doing that stuff in school. Like, you know.
Yeah, it's so horrible because also now as like a filmmaker, I've really tried to carry my experience, you know, empathetically into my work.
Yeah.
And so at first I thought like as a filmmaker, I never want anyone to audition. I'll only work with my friends. I'll only work with people I know. But there's actually a little bit of a problem with that in that like it is good for actors to feel that they've earned something. I think that that's meaningful and that it actually helps the cohesion and collaboration of the group. So I've actually gone 2 auditions. One of the things that I've always like tried to do is not only to make sure that is like to force myself to watch every second of an audition tape, even when I know that like this isn't the right person. And I keep a running log of every audition and like I try to remember people for like the qualities that I like should a project in the future come up where like their quality might actually be appropriate for what I'm looking for. But the one thing that I've always done and the one thing I've always hated about auditions is that they never tell you when you don't get it. You know, like you just never hear from them again. And I've become used to that 15 years later. But for the first like 6 years, like it's hard. You get your hopes up. You know, you get your dream. Your dream is still alive. My dream's dead, but my dream was alive back then. Yeah, and you'd hope to hear from them, and you just would never hear anything. And so it's like these little performances, these little pieces of yourself have just died in silence out in the vacuum of the internet. It's very hard. So the one thing that I've always tried to do, and I don't do it perfectly, so, you know, but like 95% of everybody who sends me an audition tape, I always send them an email thanking them for sending their tape. I appreciate them for their work. We've decided to go in a different direction, but like I try to keep that communication because that's something that I always wish that I'd gotten.
Yeah.
Now, granted, when you're at scale for a television show, you have to cast 50 roles per episode. And you have to do it all within like a week's time.
It's tough.
The sheer scale of that probably means that it's not possible to send those messages. And I understand that. But at least when I'm working at my little level, like that's one way I've always tried to carry my experience forward.
Yeah. And I kind of want to end, or at least the last thing I kind of want to say is like, I don't want to like, I don't think either of these 2 women deserves like any like online flack, I guess, any more than they've already gotten. Again, like I appreciate their willingness to like open up the conversation. And also like, you know, people make mistakes, and like Tiffany, I think watching it back, like she's like quite early in her career. And so, you know, hopefully like they've taken kind of this as a learning experience. I would hope. I
will go a step further to say that I would like Raven and Tiffany to bring a certain level of empathy and humility to their presentation. And the truth is that, you know, they wouldn't have the time to podcast if Tyler Perry wasn't planning on replacing them with AI in the near future.
Oh my
gosh. Tyler Perry is downscaling his productions. He needs less casting directors. And I don't think it's right to carve out a sense of your own self-importance within a media personality when your own job security is just as fragile as anybody else's. And so I wish that people could bring a little bit of that humility and empathy as opposed to trying to present themselves as sort of better than. Yeah.
On that lovely note, I think that's all we got for this week. We talked a long while, so we'll get to some of these items that we missed next week. But until then, thanks for chatting with me, Aaron. Do you have anything you want to plug?
Nothing to plug right now. But if you like this episode, please be sure to go to wherever you're listening to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars, leave a review. That would really help us out. And if you want to watch our smiling faces over on Crash Zoom's YouTube channel, you can just search Crash Zoom Pod YouTube and go there. Be sure to like, subscribe, rate, and review. This has been so fun. Sammie, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
Bye.